Morning everyone, it's Val from Technology Partners Limited. Thank you for taking the time to join us this morning on our session for manufacturing for Sage 200. In a second, I'm going to hand you over to Steve Jemmott of Sicon. He'll take you through the presentation this morning. Hopefully you'll get the information you need on the solution. Any questions, we will cover them at the end of the session for you. Okay, so with that, I'll hand you over to Steve. Thanks, Steve.
That's great. Thanks, Val. I will turn my camera off shortly, if that's okay, just to share bandwidth. I'm working from home, so if you do hear a dog barking in the background, hey, this is the new age. This is what we've got. But in terms of today, firstly, thank you everybody for joining. I'm Steve Jemmott. I'm the Sales and Marketing Director for Sicon. So I'd like to think you're in safe hands, but bear with me. I may still be a little bit rusty. But in terms of today's flow, I'm going to give a brief introduction to Sicon for those of you perhaps have never come across us as a brand, how we fit in with technology partners in the Sage ecosystem. We'll then go into Sage. So I like to show product. We'll talk about the importance of your static data. Then we'll start to flow through from production, some of the bells and whistles, and away we go. If you've got any questions, I believe there's a chat function, so please drop those in there and we'll look to get those covered. And yeah, sit back and enjoy today's session. Now, in terms of Sicon, we are classified by Sage as, and you can see in the top right-hand corner here, a tech partner plus. Essentially, we're a developer partner of Sage 200. And this is something which we've done for in excess of 20 years. And at present, we only develop for Sage 200. Now, we've got a very large portfolio, as you can see, just loading up here. We're going to focus on the manufacturing element and a couple of other sort of aspects, but all of these add-ons are designed to enhance your Sage 200 system. The vast majority sit inside of Sage, and to be fair, you won't know where Sage stops, Sicon starts in most cases, but there are some that wrap around Sage, such as the shop floor data capture, which we'll see as an Android app, but it's connected to your live system. So it's about driving those efficiencies, thinking of it as a single system, but actually picking the relevant areas that are right for yourselves as an organization. Now, we don't sell direct, we sell through Sage's partner community, and that's where Val and the team at Technology Partners have been a key strategic partner of ours for many, many years now. I've been here for coming up 10 years and obviously worked with Zaf and the team throughout that time. What does it mean for you? Well, it means that we're the third point in that triangle. So essentially, your direct comms will always be with technology partners, but we're there to back that up, and all of that underpinned by Sage. Lastly, Sage 200 is, as I like to classify, an off-the-shelf solution. So what does that mean? Well, it's within the design framework, highly configurable, but it's kind of an out-of-the-box type solution, quicker to deploy, more palatable from a cost perspective. We're the same, so we don't write bespoke. You wouldn't have a bespoke system for each individual customer, but of course the products do move on based on those requests. So that's a little bit about us. So I'm going to turn my camera off and we will go here. So in terms of your static data, so I mean the title of today's is Unlocking a New Level of Productivity for Your Manufacturing Business. And often, you know, that can mean something different to a lot of companies. Some is simply moving from spreadsheets to a system. Others, it's actually starting to use technology to enhance what they've already got. Regardless of any of that, for me personally, the most important thing is your static data. And what I mean by static data, that's your stock and your bill of materials. So what do I mean by this? Well, if you get the foundations, it's like a building. If you get the foundations right, then it's far easier to build on top. If you skip some of these details, you're always going to struggle later on down the line. So what we've done, this is Sage's standard stock system here. And if I pick my good old espresso machine and I just amend the stock item, we've got some extra tabs on there. But as I said, this is, for those of you using Sage 200, this is standard Sage record. We have enhanced it, and I can see because there's a Sicon tab in the corner or logo in the corner, but you're not going to know what we've done. So some key things, so location. So Sage can have multiple warehouse locations. What's going to be key is making sure you set the correct minimum. Now, some people use reorder, and we can look at that. A lot of the time, though, minimum would be the area. So when we get to material planning, what's the minimum level of stock that we want to hold to give us a good amount of coverage? And that's what material planning is going to bring us up to. So again, just making sure that you've got your minimum levels set up correctly. From a supplier perspective, multiple suppliers, one of those will always be the preferred. And again, for material planning, which we'll touch on later, that's the one which the system's going to use, but making sure that you've got your lead time in the system. Now, again, it's never going to be 100% accurate, but just getting those details in there just to give you a rough guide, so the system will always look to work backwards, even down to if you've got list prices, so the system bringing that rather than you having to farm for those details. Are there minimum levels that you have to order? So you must order a minimum of 1,000, or do you have to order in bulks of 10, that sort of thing. For those of you perhaps in more complex scenarios where you've got units of measure, this particular stock item doesn't have that. Again, just making sure your calculations are correct. And that's really where the relationship with technology partners and ourselves working with you during the setup is absolutely key. And if you do progress with this, top tip is test, do a bit more testing. And then when you think you've finished your testing, do that last test, because if you get all that right, when you go live, you're going to have more success. So that's kind of your basics, but then what we do is we enhance on that. So from a works order perspective, we've got things such as your minimum and maximum batch sizes. So this is great for those of you with sub-assemblies where it's not worth setting up the tooling just to make one of an item. So we'll always do a minimum run of 10. Or actually, we've got this option here with this tick box. We've got a client where for them, they need to know exactly who's worked on what finished item. It's imperative due to the industry they're in. So they might have an order of 15 from a customer, but they want 15 individual works orders. So what they don't want to do is have to put 15 lines on there. So what we've done is we've set this up so a maximum batch size of 1, tick this box here, and the moment they save it, they then end up with 15 separate works orders. So you've got that total traceability. In terms of the next level up, then your bill of materials. Now, again, depending on the sector you're in, you might not need bill of materials. We've got clients who work purely bespoke builds. There's different options for there, right the way through to those who are making sort of just recycling and continue sort of making widgets, that sort of thing, right the way through to continuous manufacturing. But again, some of the key things just to consider when you're setting that up. So this is Sage's standard bill of materials module, just as it was with stock, but again, we've enhanced it slightly. Components, pretty self-explanatory, again, based on the units of measure. All that's going to do is just multiply up. And when we convert this to a works order, we're going to take a snapshot of this. So in this instance, to make one of these are components we require. Then we get into operations. So for some customers, only interested in the materials, and that's absolutely fine. So you could leave it there. For others, it's important to either track the labor. So we want a labor cost in there, maybe just an estimate, right the way through to tracking where in the production cycle we are. And again, bringing it back to this theme of levels of productivity, it does depend on where you are, and what your objectives are as to how you configure it. But in the art of the possible, you can have multiple operations, and within those operations, we can then have resources. So you might have, as this is to runtime labor, but you might have some machine setup, so configuring the tooling, and we want to factor that into the length of time. And what we can see here is for this particular operation, so drilling, tapping, etc., it's 10 minutes per item. But then when we get to the welding, cleanup, it's an hour and a half. So again, the system's going to take that into consideration. We can even have subcontract operations as well. So perhaps partway through, we need to send the item. Once we've done the welding, we send it out for powder coating to a subcontract. So we can set that up. But again, it's just about the configuration, the setup of that, which will make your life easier down the line. Most of that standard Sage, these two are quite interesting though. So we've got the option to be able to set areas against these operations. So again, this was designed for customers who want to know where the parts are in the production cycle, or even just where in the production cycle it is. So you can't do it for parts because The moment you remove them from stock, which is what you want to make sure your stock levels are correct. The challenge you've got is you don't know where the stock is. So by linking these areas to the operations, we get an idea of going, well, it's in cooking or it's in drying or cleaning or whatever your different areas are. So you get an idea where it is in the production cycle. And that, again, will update automatically, and we'll touch on that a little bit later. The other one is something called inspection operations. So this is where it ties into shop floor. And I will go back to the website, just touch on some of the modules that we're going to touch and talk about today from a Sicon perspective, because the bulk of this is standard Sage at the moment. But from an inspection perspective, being able to set up things like yes, no answers, even down to this here where I've got to enter a number in millimeters and I've got some warnings if it's above or below different thresholds. You can have it where they take a photo. So again, this one's particular, this is when we finish the operation, some inspection questions, so being able to build that in. So rather than filling bits of paper and somebody in the back office then typing that in, actually capturing that from the production floor. So that, as I said, that's your static data. So coming back to the website here, in terms of what are we going to run through? So one of the first modules is going to be works order processing. So the idea with works orders is we take a snapshot of your bill of materials, and at that point I can do whatever I like to it. It's not going to affect the original BOM. That's our vessel for capturing what parts we need, our labor, and ultimately when we book the finished item or items into stock, then that's going to take the rolled up cost for that particular bill. We're also going to touch on MRP. So there's two sides to MRP. There's the rough cut capacity planning and then material planning. So material planning is going to look at the whole of your Sage system, and it's going to come back with things like warnings, what you need to order, what you need to make. And again, I'll touch on some of the logic behind that. The rough cut capacity planning, that's looking at your resources and just giving you a rough idea as to what you've got scheduled and whether you're within capacity. So those two by far and away are the most popular. And then what we're going to do is we're going to touch on shop floor. So shop floor is the Android app, which your shop floor, your production area, they can log in, clock onto those works orders, and you can capture who's working on what and actual live time. There are other modules that complement it, such as kitting, projects, and barcoding. I won't be showing those today, but I will talk about those at the end, providing I've got enough time. As Val knows, I do like to talk. You've probably already seen that already. So, works order processing. Now, as you can see here, just the same way as bill of materials, other than the fact it says Sicon works orders, you wouldn't necessarily know that that's not a Sage module. So in terms of creating a works order, there's a number of different ways we can do that. So the first one is we can click create works order. We can pick the bill of materials and we've got a works order ready to make to stock. And that's perfect if you're making to stock. We've got an option to create an empty works order. This is great for prototype work. So we can then add materials. We can actually pick what stock item we then want to book the finished item into. The other way of creating works orders is we can run material planning. That's going to give us some suggestions and we can generate works orders off the back of that. The third option is almost like an A or B type option, and that's off the back of a sales order. And that's what I'm going to do today. So I'm going to put a sales order on the system. I'm then going to create a works order, and that's going to be linked to the sales order by what we call a pre-allocation. And option A of that is we can have a pop-up, which you'll see, and I'll follow the workflow. Option B is if you don't want your admin or your sales team making the decisions and creating those works orders, you can switch off the workflow and your head of production or whoever it is come into this particular screen here, and they can then generate works orders off the back of sales orders. So if I had some in here, you can select the ones and you can create your works orders. So the last option is actually you can import them as well. So I'm going to put a sales order on, standard Sage sales order. Nothing untoward. Because I've got every single Sicon add-on installed, my menu is far busier than yours will be, and I'm going to have a series of pop-ups. But here we go. I'm going to pick Asda today. Ignore this pop-up and this one, not relevant there from our distribution stack. When does the customer want it? Well, they want it by the end of the week. That's great. And I'm now going to add my stock item. So I'm going to go with the Crown A that you saw earlier. It's just a single level BOM. Obviously, if it was multi-level, that's not a problem. That's just telling me it's not available from the default warehouse standard Sage feature. So from the factory, customer wants 2 of those, and I'm actually going to pretend we haven't got any in stock. So I'm going to enter unit price. There is actually an option if you do quotes where we can do an estimate works order, make changes, and then convert all of that to a sales order. But I'm going to save the line. Obviously, that could be multiple lines. Now, if you've got works order processing and you've got material MRP, then you can turn on this calculate button. And what that will do is that will analyze the details. And basically, it's going to go, can we make this? So in this instance, it's actually saying, yeah, the next available date we could make it will be today. So it's not going to look at your capacity, but it is looking at the operation, so the length of time. It's looking at all the components. Have we got enough components in stock, and can we make it? If you couldn't, then what it's going to do is it's going to look and say, well, if we haven't got enough stock, when can we get that stock in? And then it might base the next available date based on if that stock arrives on time, when we can do that with the obviously with the operation time. Alternatively, perhaps the operation time is 3 weeks. Customer wants it for Friday. We've got enough stock, but we can't because of the production time. So again, just a very simple way for your salespeople just to, as they're putting on, going, I can't guarantee, but things look promising at this stage. So I'm just going to save this. It's going to flow through a few different pop-ups. Ignore that's just back to back. I don't need to worry about that. That's standard Sage confirmation where we can enter the customer number. 5839 is our sales order number. Ignore that pop-up. That's just because I've got projects installed. But this is the workflow that I was on about. So at this point, it's saying we haven't got enough in stock. Obviously, if we had stock, then I could have just allocated and got it out the door. But we haven't got enough in stock. Do you want to create a works order? And I'm going to say yes. And actually, it's going to create 2. Now, if you've got sub-assemblies, we've got a variety of different options that can pop up in terms of, do you want to make the sub-assembly? Do you want to use stock on a sub-assembly that's already live? Perhaps if there's an overstock, or do you want to use stock? So a variety of different options depending on how you work. There we go. There's my sales order on the system. And if I go and view it, we can see, ignore that pop up there, we can see that we've got a sales order is 5839. And if I come into works orders, you'll have a works orders tab. So the works order number is the same as the sales order number, and then 001 because it's line number 1. But we've got a link back to the sales order. So as we're updating that, so part allocated, part issued, booked in, the salesperson or whoever can see the status direct from the sales order, what area it's in. So do you remember I showed you about the area of production and actually what the due date is? So again, what we'll always look to do is get it done the day before and working backwards based on your work pattern. So let's have a look at our works order. A couple of different ways. There is a list view. I prefer to come into the process works order screen, and we can see there's my works order with all the details. If I edit that, what's happened is it's taken the bill of materials, it's multiplied all of the components by 2 because we're making 2. It's then also looked at all the operations and worked it out. And this is my works order. So it always opens up on the materials tab. I can see a list of the materials, my free stock, etc., what the finished product is and have I booked it in. And then we've got a series of other tabs which I'll work through. But at this point, as I mentioned earlier, we can do what we like to this. It's not going to affect the original BOM. And this is great for those of you who are in a situation where customers might have configuration options. So it could be something simple as different dimensions. So we're going to need extra poles, or perhaps they want a different color paint. So we need to swap the paint out. And it gives you that flexibility rather than having to have a separate bill of materials for each option. As we go through, we can see the original quantity, but I can select a stock item and I could edit that and I could change the quantity. So I'm going to say that we need 3 of those, but because I've made a change, I have to pick a reason from a predetermined list that you would set up. So as I save that, that's now 3. If I calculate the cost, it's actually updating the estimated cost of this based on all of those details, and it's trying to pull through, could be list prices, average prices. I've got options to remove items. I can even add items in, and again, that's going to update the cost. If I right mouse click, then a variety I could draw down to the stock item. I will touch on future stock movements. That's our screen shortly. I could change the view so I could see what warehouse we're taking the items from, because again, it's possible to take the components out of your component warehouse and then book the finished item into your finished items warehouse, again, depending on how you work. We've also then got this option for alternate items. So it's set up against the stock item. And this is great, again, if you've got, it could be scenario number one is you've got different material finishes. So the customer could go for a different color, or you know, it could be brown leather, black leather, blue leather, red leather, it could be faux leather, it could be Alcantara, that sort of thing. So again, rather than have to have a bomb for each one, I could just swap and say, actually, it's not going to be this, it's going to be this item. What it will do is it will swap those two round. And again, you're going to get the updated cost, because of course leather is going to cost more than false leather. Alternatively, it could be that it might be a resistor, but there's different resistors that you can use if you haven't got stock of the normal one. So again, just about speeding up those decisions as you go. I mentioned the operations. So what that's done is taken all those operations and just extrapolated those out. And it's working backwards from when should we start it sequentially to when it's going to finish, and we can see how far through. That then updates from labor and machine time. We can then see our estimated cost. Now, for some customers, they'll just roll the estimated cost up into the finished works order, but there is an option to switch over to using actual cost, which is great once you're up and running with shop floor. And talking about shop floor, what I'm going to do at the moment is I'm going to print off my route card. This is unique for that particular order, and I'm now going to clock on to my operation. So I'm sharing the screen of my Android device. It's got an inbuilt barcode. I don't have to have a device per person. You set up your employees and they've got a unique PIN. So I simply go over to the Android device. And some customers have them either end of the production area. Some will have one per production area. But I simply pick up the device. I log in with my PIN. It brings me to this screen. Now I could search for the works order, or I could scan this barcode that's going to take me to the top level. I'm not going to do that just yet. I'm actually going to scan this. This is the operation that I want to work on. So just scan that. That's taking me straight to that operation. It's going to tell me how long I should work on it, how many I should be making, and I've started that. And I can now log out. I'm actually going to minimize that down there just for a second. So I'm just going to log out now of shop floor. And what we can see, if I just refresh this, we can now see Steve Jemmott, so that's myself. There's no time, but I'm actually working on this particular works order. And if I minimize these for a second, it does then open up things like, so we're just working on our own dashboard viewer designer, but could be Power BI, it could be Excel spreadsheets. But again, because all the data is in your single Sage database, it does open up things such as being able to see who's working on what. So this is just kind of a basic example of one of our inbuilt dashboards there, which, as I say, we're looking to sort of commercialize that and give it options. So please do inquire should you be interested in that. But we can see when I started, what team I'm in, what operation I'm working on, the quantity, how far through. I've not completed anything yet, and the works order number. And of course, that's live, so that'll just update. So again, just an example of being able to see who's working on what. If we carry on working through our works order, non-stock items is an interesting one. So this is, again, it could be bubble wrap, it could be boxes, perhaps you don't want to stock them, but you want to add a notional cost, but you might also want to order them. So we can enter the quantity and the price, and down here, we can actually create purchase orders from those non-stock. So again, we can capture those in. I mentioned subcontracts, and we've got an operation. I won't run through that today, but we've got an option whereby you can, if you've already got it in the operations list, you'd have it here, but you can dispatch. So you can create a purchase order. You can dispatch either components or the finished item, so the components or that item there, send it out to your subcontractor so you can track what you've sent them, and then you receive them back in so we can track that side of things as well. So again, just a way of capturing that. And of course, the cost of all of that subcontract then is rolled up into this. History, just a mini audit trail as we start to add components, make changes, etc. Options for multiple finished parts. So if you have 2 items that end up booked in, lots of different things, even down to scrapping your components or your finished item. So a lot of options in there. And then lastly, before we then move into MRP, it's just being able to compare your original estimate with what your cost summary is going to be. So I've just calculated the summary. Ooh, find that from there, but being able to see what was the original budgeted cost, and then as you book it in, because of course, depending on how you've got your costing method for your stock items, you might have a slight variance. If we've scrapped and had to add extra cost components in there, all of those wonderful things we're going to see, or if we've spent longer on there, you're then going to be able to track all those details. So there's my works order and kind of the basics for that. So what I want to do is, firstly, I'm just going to allocate the stock. So what allocating does is that ring fences, it's still in stock, but it's going to ring fence that stock for us. So it reduces the amount of free stock. Now, the reason I've done that is when we come back to shop floor, I want to show you another option in terms of consuming that stock. But for the moment, I now just want to quickly switch over to MRP. So at this point, let's have a look at material planning. Now, there's a few things here. We can run MRP as many times as we want, don't have to kick people out of Sage, but every time you run it, it will delete the previous suggestion. So you'll only ever have one live suggestion. What it's doing is taking a snapshot and it's now working through all of the stock items. So a whole array of options. At the moment, it's working through my works order. So it's looking at all the BOM items and just seeing, based on future movements, do we need to manufacture anything? So I spoke about this future movements and I will show you the screen, but what do I mean by that? But it's going to look at your opening pre-stock. So it's going to ignore anything that's allocated. It's just, we're just interested in the available stock. It's then going to look at your minimum stock level or reorder, depending which one you're using down here. It's then going to look at the demand. So that might be we've got sales orders requiring a finished item, or if it's a component, we've got works orders requiring that. So that's going to reduce the balance. It might be we've got a works order that's already on the system that's going to add stock in. So then, of course, the balance is going to go up. Or we've got purchase orders that might be have not come in yet. And it's going to keep analysing that until such time as it's going to drop below that minimum level. And then it's going to work backwards based on your lead time or your production operation time to give you a suggestion of when you need to make it. Now, I've got about 1,000 stock items, just over 100 bombs. That's taken, just over a minute. Of course, it's going to depend on how many stock items, how many bombs you've got, your speed of your server, etc. But we do try to optimize it. And the first screen you're going to get will be a list of warnings. Now, it is demo data, so bear with me, but we've got things like suggested purchase order may not arrive in time, in this instance, for a suggested works order. It's not saying it can't, but it's just based on the logic. It's not going to be able to do that. You might get things such as purchase orders are overdue, works orders are overdue, a works order may not be built in time for a sales order, etc., etc. Even down to, for those of you using traceability, we can see it's warning us saying there's a low past their use by date. I've got rather a lot here. As we go through, you might get reschedule messages. We've kept this very simple, but if you've got a works order with associated purchase orders and you push the works order back, you might run this and get a message saying actually you can reschedule the purchase orders. We're not going to go off and automatically do that. It's important we present the information, but that your team are making those decisions. Nobody knows your business better than you do. If you're using warehouse hierarchy, then it might suggest stock transfers. So perhaps there's a sub-assembly you make in Italy, which we need in the next level, where we're going to have to transfer that from Italy over to the UK, for example. There's our traceability. It's just going to show some items which are either getting close, so the sell by date is getting very close, or the use by date, or as we saw earlier, they're over. Kitting I'll talk about a little bit later. Suggested works orders. So what we can see here is, well, why is it suggesting them? So on the right hand side, we've got some options here, minimum stock. We've got the quantity it's recommending that we make. We can override that as well. Current free stock and when the system's recommending that we start to make them. So for example, here we don't actually need to do that until the 3rd of September. So it will look out into the future and we can adjust those dates. And actually all I can do is I can tick those and then click on create works orders. Then we get into our purchase orders. So this tab here would be where we're buying into stock. You might also have situations or scenarios where you've got sales orders where you buy and ship direct from your supplier. So those purchase order suggestions will be here. So it's not just for manufacturing, it's looking at your wider business. So if you've got distribution arms as well, or spare parts, that sort of thing, it's going to look at the whole picture for you. Now, in terms of the PO creation date, we can sort that, and it's going to give you dates, again, potentially into the future of when you need to place these. So you can ignore that, but it's going to look at the lead time, so the requested date, and as I mentioned earlier, it's going to work backwards. So it's actually saying we don't need that till the 3rd of September. It's a 20 working day lead time, so we don't need to place that till the 14th of August. Stock item details, again, the quantity, we can override that, your stock levels, your preferred supplier, but we do show you the rest of your purchase-led supply list. So these two are set up as suppliers against the stock item, so I can select another one. I can pick from the rest of your purchase ledger. So I'm not suggesting that you'd nip to your local hardware store, but if there is a local provider, you can select them from the purchase ledger without having to amend your stock item and then reset it up. You can enter your price, and we've got filters at the top to be able to filter by supplier. Again, some logic as to how we've come to the price. So last buying price, list price, a live price of an open PO, average buying price as well. And then you get the reasons why. So if I just double click on a couple of these, see if I can talk you through that. So in this example here, we've actually got a minimum stock level of 109. It's an interesting number, but we have to buy them in multiples of 50. We've got our opening free balance. I've got some projects because I've got Sicon projects. We've got a load of issues and that on projects, which brings the balance negative. So because we've got to order in multiples of 50, if you'd ordered, what's that, 120, if we ordered 124,950, it wouldn't bring us above the minimum stock level. So it's suggesting the next multiple up. And therefore, because that's above, the system's happy. And of course, it's then going to suggest buying that. Realistically, it'd be back here, buying ahead of the time. If some of that's a load of rubbish, then you can amend the stock item if you wanted to, and make some tweaks as well. But again, that's how it's deriving it. What you can do is you can then just select ones that you want to place, click on create purchase orders, and where it's from the same supplier, the same delivery location, if I click on create, it would then generate those as standard size purchase orders. And it will create a pre-allocation because it knows we're buying it for these works orders or these sales orders, but it might be for minimum stock. It's going to create a pre-allocation. So when we goods receive, it's going to automatically allocate to the orders that were based on that demand. And again, for a lot of customers, that is a huge time saver. A lot of the time you're running off reports or you've got somebody with spreadsheets. It is a different way of thinking of things, but often it's delivering what you need, still gives you that level of control. I did mention rough cut capacity planning. So again, the idea behind this is you've got your employees, you put them into teams, they've got work patterns. So just being able to see at a high level what your available capacity is, both for labor and machines, and actually what your demand is that we've got scheduled in. So this is at a top level, just being able to see, if I double click, we can see then what we've got scheduled in, but being able to drill down to your teams and being able to then see what the demand is, are we over or under capacity, can actually assign operations to individual employees if you wish as well. The other end of the scale, we've got our works order. So just a list view, what's due this week, what's due next week and over. If we've got any overdue works orders, what's remaining on there. I've actually had a bit of a tidy up. Some systems I'm operating a lot better. Are we overloaded as well? You'd see some details in there. And then we get down to more diary type views. So being able to see at the top level works order perspective, what we've got scheduled in. So being able to see our works orders and move those around where relevant. Down to individual operations for that particular day, so we can see the works orders, and I can actually drag and move these and they will update the dates on the order. even down to I actually quite like this Gantt chart. So being able to bring my teams in, for example, and then see what we've actually got scheduled for those teams in terms of the operations are being, you know, are they over or are they under capacity based on what dates what days we've got scheduled in. So if I just go back here, being able to see what we've got scheduled in for those, and again, I can move those around. So it is rough cut. It's based on live works orders, but just presenting that information in a slightly different way. Right. So I mentioned that I was going to come back to our works orders. So I'm actually going to, so I don't want the website. That's what I'm looking for here. So I'm just going to log back in for a moment, and I can see my live activity. I'm going to click on that, and I'm actually going to stop. And at this point, I can stop or pause and say, I'm going for lunch, machine breakdown, you pick a reason, I can tell it how many I've made. I'm actually going to fully complete this operation. And because I've got it set as an inspection operation, this is the example of it's going to say, well, is there any damage? What's the bearing? So I'm going to say 1 mil, but give me warnings otherwise. I'm happy with that. And it's, as far as I'm concerned, it's passed the inspection. If I confirm that, then that activity is ended. And it takes me back to the top level of the works order. So again, if you remember, there was a barcode right at the top. If I'd have scanned that, this is what it would take me. I can see all of the operations, how far through we are. And if I go to materials, because I allocated the materials here, I've also then got the option to enable the user to basically say, I've issued. So I've removed those from stock. And if I just refresh, actually be able to issue. So yes, I've taken them. So issuing is they've been removed from stock. What I've also got the option to do is, if I go to the top right hand corner here, is perhaps I've needed some other parts. So I can search for stock items as well. I can pick the warehouse that I'm going to take the stock items from. I can pick the bin that I've taken the stock. I have to enter the same reason, and I can say, yes, I've used one of those. I can add a comment if I want to, but if I add that to my works order and I refresh this, that's also now added and issued to this. Now, again, there's a bit of a debate. So if we come back to the website, I did mention there's a couple of others. So barcode, which we're not going to cover off. There is a barcoding one which will allow you to pick, issue, and even book works orders on the handheld. And barcoding is designed more so if you're the type of organization where actually you pick all the components into boxes to give to the production floor, then perhaps adding barcoding, and often both will coexist. But if it's not, and you just simply want to say, well, we've allocated stock and they issue that stock and tell the system where they took it from, but then you've got that option within shop floor as well. Come back to my labor, we can now see, oh, hang on, we pick this in the right order. We can now see Steve Jemmott, the actual time. And if I edit, that's actually filling in my centralized timesheet as well with my start and end times. So again, if I forget to clock off, you can make amendments where necessary. So that's kind of the basics. So in terms of booking it in, so I suppose the last stage, it is the process would always be allocate. So allocate all of your stock, issue all of your components. So that's removing them from stock. And again, as you said, we could do that in barcoding. We could do that in shop floor. And then the last step is then booking the finished item in. And if you're using traceability, again, we'll hook into how Sage has got that. But as I book the finished item, that's going to complete my works order. And because I've got that pre-allocation to my sales order, it's now saying, well, actually, we're going to automatically allocate to our sales order. And that's now completed my works order. And that's one option and one way of doing it. Second option you've got is within the process works order screen, you could select multiple works orders, do a bulk allocation, a bulk issue, and a bulk book. That's probably the most popular. So you get to the end of it. And again, depends on the type of industry you're in. But for some where bits of paper flow around, come back and go, yeah, we made all of those. That's a good option. We even have bulk back flush functionality as well. So a variety of different ways of doing this. But most importantly is that's completed our works order. And if I come back to my sales orders now, that's allocated and ready for dispatch. So at this point, I could dispatch this using standard Sage. But I did say I wasn't going to touch on barcoding, but I will do. This is where, from a barcoding perspective, we can pick up a barcoding device. Again, it's an Android app connected to your live Sage system. As I mentioned earlier, I'm actually working from home, so I'm connected to my home Wi-Fi, going over the internet to where this Sage system is. So I'm not even in the same vicinity, and this is how quick it's working there. So at this point, I can go to dispatch my sales orders. And if I just move it across to this side, I've got sales order 5839. So there it is there. And at this point, I can see the details of who it's going to. It tells me where in the warehouse, so my bin location to go and pick them. If they've got barcodes, I could scan the barcodes. I can print labels if I want to, I can pick them. I can pack them into boxes if I want to, and then dispatch. And again, that's great. We can then print box labels. We know what's gone in which box, but I'm just going to dispatch the whole lot. There's a courier integration module. So I did say, you know, we cover kind of a lot of the elements there. You don't have to take them all, but I could pick a courier. But if I dispatch the item from here, a few things are happening now. That's now updating our Sage system. So if I refresh this, that's now fully dispatched. It's ready for invoicing. And our dispatch notes, if I come into here, there's our dispatch note, which has gone to the local printer for us to put on the outside of the box or inside the box, depending on what you process. So again, you don't have to go for all of that. And I think that's the important bit, is just because I'm showing you the art of the possible. And of course, each one is going to improve productivity for you. I mean, barcoding, being able to goods receive, move the stock around the warehouse, and it updates your Sage system live. Massive amounts of benefits there. You don't have to go for all of those. And for some customers, that's quite a scary step. So let's just start with works orders and MRP, and then we'll look to add shop floor and barcoding at a later stage. So last but not, put my teeth back in. Last but by no means least, I did mention two other modules. So within manufacturing, there's a couple of other modules that I won't show today, but I will just talk about. Kitting's an interesting one. So we've got some customers where they'll look at Sage bill of materials because you're not manufacturing, but you're taking a number of individual components and putting them into a box. It could be a service kit for a Range Rover, that sort of thing. But you want a bit more flexibility whereby you have the option to be able to tweak that on a customer by customer order. And that's really where kitting comes in. So you don't need bill of material. I mean, both can coexist, but essentially you say, this is the kit stock item. So it doesn't have to be a special stock item. And then you design your kit to say that comes with, so the finished stock item might be Range Rover service kit, and that comes with one oil filter, one air filter, one fuel filter, 1,000 gallons of oil, whatever it would be in there. So you might sell just the oil, you might just sell the oil filter, but actually we might sell the kit as well. So we can build them to put them into stock. So what that would do is that would remove the individual components from stock and book the finished service kit into stock at the rolled up cost. But there is an option where you can put a sales order on and you can tweak and design the kit at the same time. So actually, customer wants the service kit, but they don't want a fuel filter this time. Or we're not going to use that fuel filter, we're going to use a different one because we haven't got enough stock. You can then build the kit on the fly and then dispatch all the lot from within the sales order. And that works lovely with barcoding, where as long as you allocate all the stock, in barcoding, they pick all the individual stock items and it builds the kit in the background. So again, it's a separate demo. It's quite a simple demo, but if that sounds or anything resonates with you, then that's an interesting one. The other one then is projects. So as I said earlier, in manufacturing, most customers, the most popular would be works orders and MRP. Kitting's quite niche. Projects in a manufacturing is quite niche as well, but there's a number of applications for this. So for some customers, they are manufacturing for a wider project. So it might be shop fitters or something like that. So you're making lots of different works orders for a single project. So what you want to do is capture the cost from the works orders And then you might have a sales order, but rather than dispatching the stock items, you've got stage billing. That's where projects comes in. So you link all of those works orders to a project, you link sales orders to a project, and then your project is giving you that overall profitability. Then we've also got the other side where we mentioned the flexibility with works orders where you can add, remove parts. So you essentially are bespoking that unique build for a customer. But if you're in a complete bespoke manufacturing environment, then for some customers, they don't bother with bill of materials, they don't bother with works orders, they'll actually use projects. And the flexibility of projects is, and we've got a boat manufacturer in Wales who each boat's unique. So they use a project, they use break it down into phases, stages. So they'll have a phase stage activity, which is the propeller assembly. You can do planned purchases. They'll issue what materials they've used. So removing them from stock, and then you've got the cost of those materials against that particular area of the manufacture. They capture their labor time against it. So you're building up your costs for your manufacturer in a far more flexible way. So lots of different options. Hopefully some of what I've gone through today resonates with you. Certainly it's you don't have to do all of what I've gone through, but today is just to give you an idea of sort of different ways customers would use this and lock their productivity within that manufacturing environment. So that's it for me today. What I would say just before I ask Val if we've got any questions in the chat, always reach out to your account manager at Technology Partners if you're interested in anything we've gone through today. If you reach out to them, we can then just arrange a one-to-one bespoke demo. So Val, I guess over to you. Were there any questions in the chat today, or have I stunned people into silence? You're on mute there, Val. Val, you're on mute.
That would help, wouldn't it?
It was going so well up to that point.
After all this time, you would think we would know, take yourself off mute. No, Steve, I've been keeping an eye on the chat. We've not had anything through. But as you've already said, if anyone does have anything that they want to talk about on an individual basis, then please just reach out to the team and we'll pick up and get back to you with whatever you need to know. So hopefully you've all found that really useful today. Thank you, Steve, for your time going through the solution, and hopefully we'll hear from you soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.